Welcome to this edition of Rattling the Bars. I'm your host, Master Musa. Back in the 60s, we had an organization that formed a formidable fighting formation. It was known as the Black Panther Party. The founder of Rattling the Bars, Eddie Conway, was a former member of the Black Panther Party, was set up, framed, and locked up for almost 40 years before he was released. During this time while he was incarcerated, he organized a collective of prisoners that we developed, a collective called the Maroon Intercommunal Survival Collective, which was a hybrid form of the Black Panther Party. Joining me today is the children of Russell Maroon Shoatz, who also found himself in the same situation that Eddie Conway and other members of the Black Panther Party found themselves in. They dared to struggle and they dared to win. And as a result of that, they found themselves captive, enslaved, and fighting for their freedom. Joining me today is Russell Shoatz and Sharon Shoatz. Welcome to Rattling the Bars.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so recently, and if I'm not, y'all can correct me as we go along, y'all have a new book coming out called Am Maroon, and it's the memoir of your father, Russell Maroon Shoatz. And it's slated to come out this month, or is it already out this month?
Yeah, it was out this month. Yeah, the pub date, September the 3rd, the publication date, September.
Okay. So let's unpack. Let's unpack, first of all, who was Russell Maroon Shoatz? You can start with this one, Russell, and Sharon, you can fill in. And it's not a chauvinist thing, it's just the way I want to do it at this time.
So my father was basically a young Black person growing up in a community, a Black community in West Philadelphia. At that time, pre-60s and pre-civil rights time, there was a gang culture in Philadelphia. He was a part of that. There was a doo-wop culture in Philadelphia. He was a part of that. Singing on the corner, drinking wines, all that stuff. Went to some juvenile detention centers for his youth involvement in some of that gang and street activity. Then became older and got politicized through going to see Malcolm in New York, and then was involved in a political action, which was the retaliation shooting of a police officer after Amadou Diallo style, George Floyd style shooting of a youth in Philadelphia. And that's kind of a nutshell, I guess, bio of my dad.
Okay, and Sharon, in terms of your father's maturation, how did y'all, because y'all was young when he got locked up, how did you process his maturation in terms of, like your brother said, growing up in Philly, being subject like Watts, Compton, Southeast DC, you name it, any ghetto that was being colonized by the country and policed by the police. How did you look at your father's growth and development in terms of his ultimate maturation to become a political figure?
I think for me, I think I lived in two worlds. One in which I knew my father was a part of something larger that I couldn't actually define as a child, but I know my family was instrumental. His family in particular, his, my aunts and uncles were definitely there for us growing up and keeping us in that realm of consciousness about what was going on with my father, but not really cluing us in on it as we know it in his autobiography.
Right.
And then on the other hand, we were children growing up, and we weren't subjected to the type of bullying that we see today. But I know when my father escaped both times, we then encountered questions about, who we were. Because, the Shoatz name, it's not a common name. And when you see that
Yeah.
plastered all over the newspaper, cop killer, as a child, you then get those questions. But I didn't feel that our community wasn't there for us. The community was still very supportive. And again, the Shoatz family, my aunts, my grandmother, they were always there to help us understand some of what was going on, but not really the level that I know it to this day.
Right. And okay, let's talk about how did this particular project come about? Because do y'all have another book that was written, or is this the first book that's written?
So his first book was the Maroon and Implacable, which was a series of writings that he had did over a number of years that was out there in the ether. A lot of anarchists was publishing it, and people were reading it all over the world, really.
Right.
And he then this project in particular came about, I would say, in the 90s, particularly in 1990 when I moved to New York City. He had asked me to get his dossier to the tribunal. They were having a tribunal at that time for U.S. held political prisoners, the human rights abuses. And I was new to New York, the geography and the landscape, so I didn't find it. It was on Hunter's campus, and I didn't know the campus, and I didn't know where I was going. But in the process, I ended up meeting members of the Black Panther Party in the BLA. And that was like Safia Bukhari, Alphabet Hassan, the Holder brothers. And these people actually knew my father. So here I was meeting, these 20th century revolutionaries in the Black Panther Party. And it was on the hills of the landscape of, Nelson Mandela being freed. I went to LA and happened to see him in the Coliseum, at the Coliseum. And so they started telling me stories. So it allowed me to lean in on these stories that I had never heard. I had visited them all through my life. My family was there and supportive, but they had never really shared any stories.
Right.
And so from that, it allowed me to press my father, like, who are you? Really, who are you? You know? And I know you're my father, the birth, the seed and the genetic piece, but
But who are you?
Yeah. So that started us writing back and forth until we had this family document. And then, he wanted to then use that document to get out of solitary. And that's the collaboration where Kanya comes in, and now we have what you have today, which is the publication of I Am Maroon, which was a family document that was used to try to secure his freedom from solitary. Fred Ho had suggested that he use it. They brought Kanya in, and then that collaboration began. And here you have this final production of I Am Maroon.
And Russell, like Sharon said, she found herself at one point in time, like after being exposed to our comrades, members of the Black Panther Party and other revolutionaries and people fighting our struggle. At one point, she became enlightened that, okay, my father is my father, but he's somebody else. Did you have that same experience being exposed to people that ultimately gave you a different perspective of your father, or you always had this perspective of your father as being a freedom fighter and a revolutionary?
No, yeah, I had a similar experience.
Talk about it.
Yeah, so I had been visiting my dad and doing work around him for a couple years before my sisters kind of joined in that movement to liberate my father. And just like her, and all of us and people after my sister Sharon, my other sisters and brothers, as we all came to support him at different times, would ask him, like, who are you, dude? Like, even if I had conversations with my sister and be like, oh, dad said this or whatever, it's still that, because it's your biological father or whatever, it's still that I guess, interpersonal conversation that you want to have with that person, with your dad, and say, tell me, my first question and my naivete, my first question was, who was the shooter? Did you shoot the cop, or did one of the other four men shoot?
Right.
And that question was for me to the next question was, if you did shoot them, then why don't you let them dudes go? And if you didn't shoot them, why don't you try to get out?
Right.
But that wasn't their rubric. That wasn't their understanding. That wasn't going to happen. They all kind of went to jail, went to death. They would die before they would tell on each other or try to get out of the situation. But yes, it went very similar. Everybody wanted to know who their father was.
Right. And let's frame this situation, because we're talking about Philadelphia and Rousseau and like the Gestapo. LA had a Gestapo unit, but Philadelphia had a Gestapo unit of police that even your father spoke about in the early years when he was young, that they just randomly walked down on black youth and just commenced to beating them and then lock them up. But let's talk about that period, to your knowledge, in terms of like what led to them ultimately being captive. What was that environment from your knowledge? Because he talked about in the book, what was that environment like during that era that gave birth to Maroon?
If people don't know, they should Google Rizzo.
Come on.
Rizzo was police chief in Philadelphia. He is the forerunner of the police states that we see today. Mm-hmm. They had a Gestapo unit, in LA. They had a couple units, around the country at that time. But even prior to those days, when Rizzo came into office, he was the first police chief to say, let's send our officers over to Israel and train over there with them. That's the, let's be tactical with the dogs and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. Let's strip the Panthers naked in front of their, office. Mm-hmm. Let's do all of these radical things, policing wise, to keep, for lack of better terms, the people on edge. And it really did keep people on edge. And also the sentencing and the judicial followed his kind of lead in the context of Philadelphia having the most lifers, the most juvenile lifers, the most people without parole, juvenile lifers without parole, lifers without parole, just the toughest sentencing in the country over a mass group of people, Mm-hmm. And so that's just a part of that culture. But you also see it in the activism ideology of Philly, all the way from my dad through Move, through the juvenile lifers, through, and so it's a certain type of energy that came out of that tough repression that you're seeing bloom, 30, 40 years, after.
Sure.
Yeah, and I would also just add to that, not much, but the fact of the racism was more entrenched with Rizzo, as well as the brutality and oppression. But, even that racist mentality of law and order, and we have to, keep these Black or minority people in their place.
That's right.
And with housing, with discrimination, it was just rampant in Philadelphia. So, it's not a wonder that there were people taking up arms in Philadelphia to deal with oppressive state and injustice where they saw it, right in their communities where they lived at. They saw it every day.
Right. And also, I remember when they ran down before they dropped the bomb on the Move, I remember looking at an article in a radical newsletter where they had a picture of the police taking the butt of the gun and bashing one of the Move members' head in, with no, it was almost like the My Lai massacre where they showed that picture of the police shooting the brain out of that kid in Vietnam, right? So we had so this, but the point I wanted to, and I like what you say about Google it, but more importantly, you don't have to Google to find out who is. All you gotta do is read I Am Maroon to get an understanding on who the Philadelphia police were, how they operated, and that'll give you and give you context that this is a real live person that's regurgitating or recounting this event. Talk about your father in terms of working his way out and ultimately like getting to a point where he was positioned to get out, and how that the death of 1,000 cut had took its toll on him in terms of his health and everything.
Yeah, I think Maroon, my dad never relented from freedom, and it didn't matter, what it took or what toll his body was going to take, because ultimately those beatings, when you escape from prison, don't think they just rushing you back in nice, I mean, he took a beat down.
Yeah, I
He
already
took
know.
several beat downs.
Yeah.
To the point where his body ultimately succumbed to some of that, of course. And then the brutality, I guess, of solitary confinement.
Come on.
To come out and not being able to walk up and down steps because you hadn't walked up and down steps for 22 years.
Mm-hmm.
And, when he came out, we was happy, but we didn't think about the physical toll
that
it would take on him. And to know that, the prison, the food is unhealthy.
Come on.
You know what I'm saying? And it's up to the point where the medical is like non-existent.
Inadequate.
Wasn't for, my sister,
That's
Teresa,
right.
who, she was really on his medical health, and she held them to a standard. And they was calling her and reporting, what his status was.
Yeah, that's right.
You got to hold them accountable in the prison system. If not, your loved one is languishing there, with, the runaround they give you on the phone.
I know that all the way up to the warden, but also all the way up to the deputy of the prisons, who controls all the prisons in Philadelphia, they were probably actually glad that my father was released just on the strength of my sister's constant calling them, constant just like being on them. Say like just one less person. All right, Maroon's out of there. We don't got to hear Teresa no more. We won't hear Teresa Shoatz calling us every day about, follow up, what's going on, blah, blah, blah. And so when you talk about, that ongoing struggle for freedom, there were a lot of different people involved over the years, a lot of different moving parts, and definitely towards the end, because we had pretty much threw a lot of things at the wall, but we had not engaged the medical community within the prison, the nurses, the doctors, when he would get sent out to other institutions, all the way up to, the deputy of all of the prisons, and engaging him and saying, our father is in this situation, it was COVID, all these things, he got stage 4 cancer, you guys don't have the apparatus or anything to really take care of anybody with these conditions. Allow us to have them, and they fought that, they fought that.
Oh, and speaking, I did 48 years in prison prior to getting out, and I did a lengthy amount of time in solitary confinement. I was in the Supermax, but more importantly, I can identify with that situation because I remember that when a police had got killed in the Maryland pen, when they was doing an investigation, and the legislators was coming in to justify pumping more money into, building more prisons and barbed wire and handcuffs, and they had the Speaker of the House on the state level, on the Senate and the delegate side, and had the Attorney General for the state of Maryland come in. They came on South Wing, which was like the lockup wing where most of us did our time. And when they left out of there, when they left out of that wing, they was only over there for maybe a good, maybe 5 minutes, maybe. They came outside, they were like just, say we just came from the innermost circle of hell. Now imagine your father being in the innermost circle of hell 20-something years inside. That's and maintaining his faculties. So the torture, like it's because of Mumi Abu Jamal that they got medicine for hepatitis C, that they was able to get the pill that helped to correct a lot of that ailment for people that's locked up. It wasn't that they, like going back to the medical, it wasn't that they got an attitude of like, we take a hypocritical oath and that we're gonna do the best. No, we're hypocrites in taking the oath that we're not gonna apply. And it's because of y'all work that your father was able to at least get out and, and live a semblance of life before he transitioned. Talk about where y'all going at with the book at this time. What's on the agenda? And what do y'all want people to know about the work and the importance of the work as it relates to raising people's conscience about the struggle, and the struggle continue, and the contribution and sacrifice your father made, either one of y'all?
Well, we're on a book tour, trying to get it out through the book tours, through programs like yours. So we thank you definitely for having us on. And we're just trying to promote it throughout as many ways as we can throughout media and the tours. So we're in Philadelphia on the 22nd. I'm in Ohio next week at a prisoners conference with the book. And then we're in Philly on the 22nd. We're in DC and Baltimore on the 28th. And then we're heading to Atlanta, Texas. And then we're heading to the West Coast. November the 2nd, we'll be with Mike Africa from Move.
Right.
His book, he has a new book out on the Move.
Right.
And we'll be with him at the Huey Newton Foundation on November 2nd. So we're taking it on the road, and we hope that people, for me, it's twofold. One, that my father is an incredible, complicated, beautifully flawed person, but he never relented from the struggle for freedom for oppressed people all across the globe.
Right.
And secondly, the part for our family, they never really knew who he was,
That's right.
From this perspective, I have cousins. Oh yeah, we always heard about Uncle Russell, but until he came home for those 52 days, and it was a line of family to see him, and I'm glad they were able to meet him. But again, as I didn't know who he was, neither did they.
Right.
And they only knew the legend and the myth and Uncle Russell, but this story lays it out very well.
Right.
And if you're from Philadelphia, the geographics is
come on, that's important.
Extraordinary, because he lays it out, the middle class stronghold. And now Philly is what I think the poorest city in the country.
My God.
Clearly, back then there was a middle class stronghold, and he talks about it in depth. And so I think from those two perspectives, the part of freedom and this oppressed system, and where we see oppressed system and injustice, we need to be doing something about it in our own little way. I can't be Maroon. I have the genetics, but he's something special, and I can't be him, but I can, take from what I know. And like Maya Angelou said, when you know better, you do better.
That's right.
So, when you know better, you do better. And we have freedom fighters that are still locked up.
Come on.
And why? Why? And I don't know why people aren't on board with that. Black Lives Matter. They stood on the shoulders of these revolutionaries. There's no reason why there shouldn't have been an agenda regarding political prisoners. With regards to that, my brother talks about every other, revolution, they free their freedom fighters.
That's right.
I'll stop there and let my brother,
Come on, Russ.
Well, I mean, it's a catch-22 for me, and it's a little tougher for me to kind of envision what I would like people to see, because what I would like people to see is probably further down the road, and maybe either another publication, because this publication is actually my dad wrote this long before he got out, long before he even got sick and stuff like that. And so there's actually a part of his life that's not there.
Right.
And then there's a part of his life right when he's transitioning. And then there's a part of a life when he gets out and comes home and he's actually home and not in prison. That's not in the book. There's a part of his life where he turns into a whole different person than we know what's in the book, that he probably even knew of himself, or what. He just turned into a whole another different person that nobody knew, nobody ever saw before, any of that. And so those things are important to me. Also, I don't want people to get mixed up and think that this is some more of his teachings. These aren't his teachings. This is just him saying, this is my life. This is what I did, blah, blah, blah. You can get knowledge and jewels and teachings out of that. But if you really wanted to know his teachings, the final teachings kind of, sort of, you would want to look towards like his comment or in court, his transcripts from court. Also him just being like, I'm a Muslim now and everybody should take their shahada, everybody should blah, 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 like really fundamental Islamic stance, and not just Islamic, but a spiritual space. The space that most people are in when they're about to transition. And so that transition space is a whole different space with more information, knowledge, and jewels that you really only get if you're there or around or hear about it or what have you. But he was on a mission to get people to contemplate their mortality, because he was at that space of really, really contemplating his mortality. But most freedom fighters have already contemplated their mortality. They have already, if you're thinking about going over that wall, you trying to escape, then you got to think about them killing you. Or if you in some prison and and they put on the Star Wars uniform and knock on the door and come in to beat you up, that's just part of it. If you are fighting for liberation and you're incarcerated, 9 times out of 10, it's going to be some situations where you got to think about, well, are they going to come in here and try to do me? And so contemplation of mortality added with your life as a tool of liberation, because that's what Maroon's, that whole book is just about him saying, you can use your life actually as a tool for liberation, if that makes any sense. So those two things, you can't do anything. You're not going to be real effective. You're going to be fearful and scared if you don't contemplate your mortality. And people in Palestine, people in South America, people all over the world, every day wake up, have to contemplate their mortality. Every day in Palestine, when you wake up, you got to be like, what's cracking today? Is it a bomb? Is it a bullet? Is it a beating? What is it? Because it could be all them things, but I done contemplated that. And now from there, I'm moving on to here. I thought about it. Yeah, it may happen. It's a possibility. We all came here to leave. But that was something on my dad's last teaching. That was part of his last teaching.
Okay.
Have you ready? Are you ready? You built for this? Are you ready?
Yeah. Hey, and there you have it, the real news Rattling the Bars. You have Prison Letters of George Jackson. You have the autobiography of Malcolm X. You have Revolutionary Suicide, Seize the Time. You have Martial Law. You have The Greatest Threat Ever by Eddie Conway. And then you have I Am Maroon. But in each one of these books is a story that's woven all the way out about people fighting for their liberation. The story of us always, since we've been brought to these shores, fighting for our liberation. And it's important that y'all, our listeners and our viewers, understand this and look to the book, I Am Maroon, and enlighten yourself. And like both Sharon and Russell said, it's not about the individual. It's about the collective. It's about the struggle for liberation and the struggle to free humanity. Thank y'all for coming on. Really appreciate y'all. And we definitely going to be posting this information, and we'll see y'all when y'all get on this end at Sankofa. If I don't come to Philly and check y'all out.
See you.
Yeah, come to the brunch. Come and eat some of that food. It's a free brunch. You don't want to miss that.
All right, thank you. All right, all power to the people.
Power to the
Okay.
people. Peace.
Thank you so much for watching the Real News Network, where we lift up the voices, stories, and struggles that you care about most. And we need your help to keep doing this work. So please tap your screen now, subscribe, and donate to the Real News Network. Solidarity forever.